Welcome to the Create Your Happy podcast, where conscious female creators come together with a shared vision to inspire and empower women as they learn how to fully embrace their humanness, find their unique voice, and collaborate on how together we can change the world. I'm your host, Christy Holt, happiness coach and conscious funpreneur on a mission to change the world one beautiful soul at a time. All right, gorgeous, it's time to get curious and become inspired. It's time to create your happy. Welcome to the show. I am so excited. Today we have Stacey Webb with us, and Stacey is a trauma release mentor and author who guides and supports people who feel a deep longing to reconnect with themselves. I am so excited to have you here, Stacey, and I would love to just dive right into a little bit of your story of the things that you've overcome, a little bit of the background in your journey that has led you to this place where you are now. And then I can't wait to dig into a little bit more about where that is as well. But let's start with a bit of an intro and hear just a little bit of how you got to where you are now.
Sure. Thank you. First off, Christy, thank you so much for having me here today. I'm so honored and privileged. Well, okay. How did I get here today? Well, when I was 12, I experienced my first major first major traumatic experience, which was the death of my dad. And that led a lot of series and events that I remember growing up. And what first came forward is the day that my dad died, before I was even told that he passed away, I knew that he had passed away. I wasn't sure how, but I just knew that my dad had died. And that was my intuition guided me with that information. And that scared the crap out of me.
Yeah.
Absolutely scared me. Scared me because I was right, scared me because I hoped I'd be wrong, and everything in between. And so when that first started, I pushed anything relating to my intuition aside, pushed it away, didn't want to know about it. And my whole family changed also as a result of my dad dying. You know, we're going from two parents, and my dad died by suicide. So it was something that we as a family weren't expecting. I look back now and can see, you know, have memories of my dad where I could see that that would be depression, but I didn't realize it at that time. And so I was the oldest, and I felt that I needed to take on the burden of responsibilities. I felt that I needed to be the second parent. I needed to help clean, cook, help my siblings with their homework. And I really took on the role of the caretaker, the carer, you know, feeling like I needed to be the rescuer in my family.
Yeah.
And that led to me wanting to do more with my life when it came to being a caretaker. And that for me was wanting to become a police officer. I felt my service to the world would be great in serving the community, in helping people, and I felt being a police officer would be that route. And interestingly enough, that actually came through to me through my intuition. And it was growing up, that was probably the only thing that I kind of really listened to when it came to my intuition, with everything else pushing it aside. And my family did not want me to be, my family didn't want me to be a police officer. I had friends that didn't want me to be a police officer. They thought it was just the most outrageous, ridiculous notion that I could ever have. And when I finished high school, I was too young to join the police force. So I studied a science degree in hopes that when I eventually joined the police force, I could go into something like forensics, and that could be sort of my career outlet. And I studied this science degree and I fucking hated it. I dreaded going to uni every single day. I was doing it because it just made everyone else happy.
Yeah.
Everyone else seemed to be really happy with the fact that I went to university. Out of my family, My parents never went to university. My mother came here. My mother grew up in Yugoslavia, which is not a country now, and escaped Yugoslavia to go to Germany before coming to Australia. And my dad was a blue-collar worker, and they never went to university. And so I knew me going to university was a very big thing.
Right.
I knew my dad would have been very excited about that, because I remember him having I have memories of us talking about going to university when I was older. And I knew that my mum was proud. And not only that, I knew everyone else was proud around me. And so growing up where I felt invisible unless I was helping someone, I was receiving validation for being good, for being smart. You know, what a great thing you're doing, Stacey. You know, studying science, that's really hard, because it was fucking hard for me to go, oh my good, you know, like to go, oh, you're doing great. And I received validation in a different way than you're such a great helper. Yeah. And I took it on and I loved it. And even though I hated studying this degree, it was wanting this validation that I kept siding towards. And also that, you know, I didn't want to confront anyone with what I wanted to do, because I knew it would end up in arguments. I knew it would end up in disagreements, and I knew it would end up in people not understanding my side of why I wanted to be a police officer. And so I kind of then, as well as with growing up, became this people pleaser.
Well, the people pleasing is so ingrained for the caretaker, the caregiver, the one who feels empathically called to help other people. Man, we are so often entrapped by that people pleasing idea, because we don't want to disappoint someone else. We don't want to let them down, even though we may well be dying inside studying science or accounting. In my case, even though you're you know, not really loving what you're doing, the fear of disappointing others is so strong.
Yes, and I'm recovering, and in terms of my perfectionist as well. And so having this people pleaser and perfectionist within me, as much as I hated doing this university degree in science, I was feeling within myself that I couldn't pull away from it. And around that time, I had a car accident, and it was in a way that I had listened to my intuition just before I had this car accident, which actually saved my life. And as a result of that, people were telling me that my dad must be looking out for me, you know, that this accident didn't result in me dying because my dad was looking out for me. And I don't think that was the case. I think it was I listened to my intuition, which led me to save my own life. But bringing the conversations around my dad actually wanted me to ask more questions about my dad's death. I mentioned that my dad died by suicide, but that wasn't what I was told when I was 12 when he died. I was told that he was electrocuted in the house, and I never asked any more questions. Because number one, I was too scared to, and also I didn't really believe it, but I didn't want to know anymore. And so as these conversations about my dad were coming back in, I felt like I was ready to face the fear of going beyond and knowing more about my dad's death. I knew that what I was told wasn't correct, but I was happy to keep that lie. And I was ready to face that lie, knowing that whatever the truth was going to change my life again. And so I did. And I found out that my dad died by suicide, and that led me to grieve again, and actually grieve the way that I needed to grieve. And also it sort of I sat myself down one day and went, what am I doing? I'm doing something that I hate in life. I'm 18 years old and I'm hating life. This isn't how life is supposed to be.
No.
You know, what can I do? And it was like, follow your dream, follow what you want to do. You want to be a police officer, be a police officer. And so I did that. I left uni with 3 months left to graduate, and I joined the police force. And much to everyone's surprise, to a lot of people's disapproval, lovely enough though, and beautiful enough with my mum, who always disapproved of me becoming a police officer. When I said, Mum, leaving uni and I'm joining the police force, she was very accepting of it. I was, ready for all these arguments, but there was none of that when it came to her.
And we do often sort of have that worst case scenario playing in our mind.
Yeah.
And of course, this is the way that we're designed. Our mind is just like, in our brain and our body, it's designed to keep us safe. So anything that sort of triggers that not safe kind of thing. And then we have all of these crazy wild thoughts, sometimes like spiraling out of control. Worst case scenario, when the truth is maybe they'll actually accept it and be excited for us. But we've got all these stories from the people pleasing perfectionist side feeding in to say, no, just be safe, stay where you are because it's familiar, it's safe. And anything it's kind of, creating our identity in that safe space too, right? Because we're like, oh, okay, well, this is me. But I love that she was actually really accepting, because I think the truth is a lot of times that is actually the outcome. If we would stop assuming and stop running those worst case scenarios, we would experience a different created reality.
Yeah. And that was one of the things I had to face myself before I even went to everyone else about the decision I make, was my intuition was guiding me towards change the path and join the police force. And my ego was saying, no,
right,
you'll be safe here. You're not going to get possibly hurt on duty or anything like that. If you continue studying science, you can still have a great job. You'll get good money. You're still going to make everyone happy, and there's going to be no disagreements. This is a beautiful way, and you've been studying this and you're so close to graduating, and why would you do this? So the ego was very, very strong when it came to that. And it was one of the first big major time that I actually broke away from my people pleaser. And I broke away from that and did something that I wanted to do. And it was extremely empowering. I just felt absolutely free following the guidance of that. And I didn't know where it was going to lead me. I had no idea. I had no idea if I ever get in, had no idea about that. I just knew I had to do it. And I did get in. And I felt like I was a very great police officer, a very good police officer and detective whilst I was in the police force. And whilst I was there, you're surrounded by fear and trauma all the time. You're surrounded by fear and trauma from the public that you're interacting with, from their fear of something that's happened in the past or in fear of what could happen in the future. Right. And I mainly worked with and investigated sexual assaults. So I was, I would be with a victim and I would take a statement from that victim and intimately will continue contact with that victim until we went to trial, which could be a year away. So you're with them for quite a substantial amount of time. And I would see my victims in different states of trauma and in different states of dysregulation within their nervous system. And that piqued my interest to want to learn more about it, because I wanted to learn more to help them. Because as I'm taking their statement, for some of those victims, I'm re-traumatizing them. And I wanted to find a way, how could I assist them with something that is so traumatic for them, and how can I assist them that can also assist me do my job as a detective and investigate this crime that has been committed, and do that with utmost respect and ethics and non-dualism. And so with that, what led me to learn more about the nervous system, learning more about our different states of trauma, our neuroscience of trauma, and to help the public that I was there, but also it ultimately helped myself. It helped my colleagues, because again, we're all around it.
Yeah. And I'm curious how that likely tied into that moment where you finally decided enough is enough. I'm going to do the thing that I'm being called to do. How does that relate to, because I suspect there's a connection between that moment and being aware of, ego stepping in, but this time I'm going to do things differently. What was different for you in that moment?
It was very different when I became aware of how I was feeling in my body. and getting out of the autopilot of life. And that was my big thing, especially I'd go to work. Yep, I'd be in different states of dysregulation, which was needed at times in terms of going into different states of jobs that might require a heightened more awareness to ensure the public of myself, the public and my colleagues in terms of our safety. But then it was making sure that I got myself back to a sense of safety.
Yeah.
And I was realizing at that point that myself and at times my colleagues were never coming back, and we were just stuck in ourselves in a trauma state. We were stuck in that fight, flight, freeze or fawn. And it then made me to start to go, okay, how am I feeling right now? Okay, I'm feeling frustrated. Why am I feeling frustrated? What's underneath that? And it was actually being conscious of taking the time to do that. And we can be so busy in our lives, but a lot of that time it's because we're on that autopilot and we're not taking that moment to be conscious in that life, in this life. And I just not remember just going, all right, we need to start intermittently throughout the day. How are you feeling? Because if I'm starting to be on this autopilot, I'm not living in the present. I'm not living now. And where is my body? And so that's what I started to do. And with that led to me wanting to start this business as a trauma release mentor. When I mentioned that I was studying and learning about the nervous system, I did a number of certifications in EFT Tapping, in Breathwork, in Somatic Embodiments, because I wanted to learn more about it, and I wanted to make sure that I was doing it properly when it came to my work in policing. And then it just sort of branched out to go, well, actually, this is a really great way that I can continue to help people, but helping people in the way that really feels aligned to me, that really feels congruent with me, that allows people to release this fear and trauma from their life without even having to talk about the story, which was it's so different to obviously what happened when I was being a police officer and having to take their statement and they're having to tell me their story. Obviously, for some people, they're very, very comfortable in telling the story of whatever that is, but for others, it's too traumatic. And for others, they may not even know because it's just stuck in their body, this trauma. And so that led me to doing this work now and being more conscious about it, knowing that when we release this fear and trauma from our body, we're also expanding our consciousness. We're increasing and strengthening our intuition and that intuition development. And that itself also helps resourcing our nervous system.
Right.
And going to, these states of extreme dysregulation to perhaps becoming safety and grounded and out of dysregulation, having a beautiful regulated nervous system, or knowing that at points you're going to be dysregulated, but still having a beautiful resourced nervous system, which is also what can happen when you're a first responder, and beyond, just in normal life, and knowing that we can still grow and expand. And so it's
and ultimately, I think it's so fascinating. I think the number is around 60,000 thoughts that we have in a day, and 95% of them are the same as the thoughts we've had the day before. So this is that autopilot. And I know that, a lot of us, having gone through the pandemic and whatever impacts that has had, no one is unscathed. No one has escaped the last couple of years without some level of trauma, some level of, big obstacles or challenges that they've had to overcome, which have shifted things. And when we live in this flight or fight survival mode for so long, with the uncertainty of the world, with the stresses, with the financial concerns, with the lack of social components, all of these things really tend to deregulate our nervous system because we are functioning from that survival mode only, instead of overcoming that. We're just replaying yesterday's scripts, right? Yesterday's beliefs, all of the stuff that we've learned up until, right now in this moment, that create our identity, that create our current belief system. all of those contribute, and our brain with the reticular activating system actually filters out the stuff that is incongruent with that. So what happens? We continue to experience more and more of the same, the things that are confirming this is our identity. Yes, these beliefs are holding up. Yes, the flight or fight mode is necessary because we don't feel safe. And so regulating your nervous system is such a crucial component, because you can't really get to work on changing, growing, evolving, and expanding when you're stuck in that fight or flight response mode, because all you can do is to survive. So we need to regulate so that we can then become more aware, more intentional, more conscious about how we are going to move forward, how we are going to step into who it is we desire to be in the moment, so that we can create the reality, the experience, the life that we truly want, as opposed to creating out of those past beliefs and those past traumas, those past bits that we've basically built our identity on. So,
yeah, when I had started to sort of, okay, how am I feeling right now, and going from and feeling frustrated, and just seeing what those layers were happening, because ultimately every time that I would go down these layers, it would either come down to a trauma that's happened in the past that I haven't allowed to flow through within myself. And it would either be a subconscious fear, that limiting belief, deep down, it's maybe coming down to me not feeling like I'm good enough, or me feeling like I'm failing, or me feeling like I'm not worthy enough to try something. And so actually then realizing what this core limiting belief was allowed me to then actually work through that. And that then start to bring, in terms of this beautiful somatic work and embodiment, because, at times we're going to be feeling many different emotions, and we need to ensure that they're not always labeled as this good or bad, that we're allowed to be sad with whatever is happening at that point in time, and to allow that emotion to flow through us, because allowing that to happen also makes sure that that energetic block doesn't remain in our body. And that's where this fear and trauma can get stuck within. And if we're able to release that, yes, maybe in the future we face this trauma or fear again if we're feeling activated by it, but we'll have more of a sense of awareness of it, and it allows us to actually go deeper, uncovering these layers in our own healing journey within it. And that was this beautiful part of the work that I did on myself, and what I do for my clients in creating and holding this space to allow the release of that to happen, and to allow this beautiful flow of emotion, the anger, the sadness, the guilt, the resentment, or the happiness, or whatever that meant to be at that point in time, and to have it with non-judgment, to look at it with this beautiful curiosity, and bring in the love, because it's always going to be love or fear. And sometimes, especially when we're listening to the ego, we're making these decisions on fear. However, if we're able to lean into our fear with this beautiful love and curiosity and non-judgment with that, we can actually allow that to flow through us. And it's not meaning whatever happened with our trauma, it's not removing the trauma that's happened. We can't change what has happened, but we can ensure that the decisions that we're making in life, how we respond to things in life, is because we're doing it out of love, and we're not doing it out of fear. We're not doing it out of the fear or trauma being the driver of our decisions. And that's
so well put.
And that's the beautiful part of it.
Like that independent observer perspective, because I think what often happens, and obviously you're the trauma expert, but in my experience, when we can detach ourselves somewhat from the judgments, or as much as possible from the judgments, not detach from the emotion, we need to be allowed and give ourselves the space and the grace to feel. But what we need to do is catch it before we start adding all of the judgments, because the judgments and then the stories and then the thoughts, they can really spiral out of control. And that's what keeps us really stuck in the loop. And frankly, that is what is solidifying today's thoughts, which will contribute to, guess what, tomorrow's thoughts if you're not intentional about it. And one of the ways to really get yourself out of those patterns, and I know, we all have patterns that we repeat until we figure out, oh shit, this is a pattern. Okay. Don't want this pattern anymore. How do I freaking stop the pattern? And what has worked best for me and many of my clients is to really just get into the independent observer mode here. Stop putting the judgment. Nothing is innately good or bad. We have created duality so that we can sort of label our experiences as they may be compared to another. But the beautiful thing is that how you label it is actually how you experience it. So it does not need to fit a label. It just is. And when you can come to that place of releasing the extra shit that we tend to add on to just that baseline emotion or that initial thought, we can really be, like you said, more curious. We can become more powerful by using our innate abilities from that space, from a regulated space, to just feel an experience without the escalation, right? And that is a powerful space to be in, because that leaves us in the driver's seat as, the alchemist of those emotions. We can take that and create the experience we desire out of it, right?
That's right. And when we talk about, bringing in that curiosity, we know that if you're in this extreme trauma state, if you're stuck in the fight, flight, freeze, or fawn, that it's going to be hard. And that's why bringing in regulation tools for your nervous system then allows you to start having that awareness and to start bringing in that curiosity. And if there is part of this judgment that's coming through, it's, continuing with your nervous system regulation, possibly as one of the layers is to start removing through these layers of the judgment that you're specifically having, because that is what's going to help bring that awareness. That's going to help bring more curiosity in when we're able to use those tools for our nervous system. And there's many tools that we can use, and a lot of it will also be a little bit in terms of trial and error into what works for you, and also what works for you in the different states of dysregulation that you're at. You're going to be more accepting to do something when you're in one state compared to another, just because of purely on how you're feeling at the time, and to know that that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sometimes we try something and we go, it didn't work, not doing any of it. When really it's like, well, maybe that just didn't work for that state of dysregulation that you're at there now. And then as you're starting to feel a little bit more dysregulated, feeling a little bit more regulated, you'll start to bring more of that curiosity in, that perhaps that may work down the track. And so just again, having that beautiful open mind, and that will help create, doing this work helps create that flexible, regulated nervous system. We're meant to go to fight, flight, freeze throughout our day. That, we're meant to do that, but we're also meant to not stay stuck in it. We're meant to come back down to a beautiful sense of safety. And that's where we can get stuck. So being conscious and continually working on our nervous system every day will always help us down the track. It's just the same as when we work on our nutrition, and we eat healthy and we exercise. We also need to work on our nervous system, and that gets kind of left to the side and forgotten about until something really bad happens and you really need the help, and then we go and get it. But if we're able to lay down some of that groundwork before then, it then enables us, when we are in that extreme dysregulated state, that we know the tools ourselves to be able to do it. And we can do it back to ourselves.
Right? Like when I work with my clients, I like to help them to more or less build a toolbox of strategies, because let's be real. There are some certain circumstances where you'd be like, you know what, that's a tool that I like to use, but not right fucking now, because I'm just
Mm-hmm.
not having it. Right? We just sometimes are in a space where like, you know what, no, no. Mm-mm. And so we need to have an array of tools in our toolbox, some different strategies that we can pull upon and
Mm-hmm.
trust on our intuition that we know which one of those tools is right for us in a given moment. And if it doesn't work, to try something else, to trust and lean in, because ultimately I do believe that, we are all energy. Our emotions, our energy and motion, they are telling us, directing us, giving us the answers that we're seeking. If we remain curious, if we remain open, ultimately, the energy that is us has the answers. It's right there
Yeah.
in front of us. And we're often, where's the answer out there? I'm looking for the answer.
Yeah.
Ultimately, it is within us, and our ability to regulate ourselves exists within. Now, that's not to say that if we're not in a seriously dysregulated sort of state or living in flight or fight survival mode for an extended period of time, we may have really lost touch with
Yeah.
our intuition, our emotions. We may have really stuffed them in an attempt to avoid feeling uncomfortable feelings, again because we keep attaching the judgment, the stories, the beliefs, etc., instead of just being like, what an interesting observation, I'm feeling very frustrated by this situation, and releasing the judgment around feeling frustrated. You're not good or bad or right or wrong because you feel and experience something some way. You're just simply here as a human, creating multiple different kinds of experiences, and whatever it is, whoever you want to be, whatever experience you want to have in a moment is
Mm-hmm.
ultimately entirely up to you. But I'd love for you to share a little bit more, because I think, you know, holding space for someone as they are dysregulated and attempting to become more regulated, or to teach those tools, as a first responder, as a coach, as a caregiver. I think all of these empathic people, especially too, really need to be aware of the
Mm-hmm.
boundaries that they're setting for themselves, so that they can hold space for someone else going through something difficult, not take that on themselves, and not allow any of their judgments as well to step in and impact. So I'd love for you to share a little bit more about how your work specifically is helping to create that safe space for both the people who are needing to, become more
Yeah.
regulated, and the people holding space for them.
Yes. Well, first off, if you are the person who is creating and holding that space for someone else, you need to be ensuring that you are continuously working on your nervous system as well. And that's in any capacity. Even, I am a mother, I've got 4 children, and I, need to ensure that I'm working on my nervous system, because at times, I'm creating and holding space for them as well. And
Yeah.
so it's showing how we can be the creator and holder of space in our lives with anything.
Yeah.
um, and we need to ensure for our own nervous system that we're taking that beautiful time to take care of ourselves before, it's like, you can't pour from an empty cup. You need
Right.
to care for yourself before you can also care for others. And when you are creating and holding space for other people, you are creating this beautiful sacred space. You are creating this beautiful sacred space that allows them to even start feeling the slightest bit of safety within. And that's what we're doing. We need to create and hold this beautiful space so it feels safer for them,
Yeah.
for them to feel that slight sense of safety within themselves. And that's when the work can start, because when they can create this safety within themselves, and that happens with the guidance and support of whoever is co-regulating with them, whether that is their coach, their mentor, their mother, or anyone like that, their friend who is just being there for them. It's ensuring that whilst you're there and create like with them for the creating that space, that they're able to start to feel that bit of sense of safety. And there are different, you might have to try a few different ways for them to feel that sense of safety within, because of whatever state they're dysregulated state they're in. And to know that what you're doing is not wrong. If one tool isn't working, again, we don't sit there and go, I've done something wrong, because we're taking something personally for ourselves. We're not then creating the space for them. Okay, so what else can we do? And that's where we can start. When they can start creating safety within themselves, they're able to start cultivating this beautiful relationship with themselves. And that's where the work can start.
That's where they can really start to shift those beliefs that create their identity. And ultimately, a lot of us really can feel a little bit stuck, I guess, in our identity, and especially moms. When you're focused on having a family, what kind of can happen is that you lose a little bit of your passion and your drive for who you are and what you wish to express. And now that's not to say that's a bad thing at all. It's just that our identity has shifted into being a mother. And I call it just a momitis, when we are so focused on that one piece of who we are that we kind of tend to forget the rest of it about who we were before we were a mother, or who we were before we had a trauma, or who we were, really ultimately it comes back to what you said before, fear and love. Ultimately, we are all designed for love. We are love at the core. And when we can, keep that at the forefront and be really intentional, asking questions, getting curious. Why do I believe this thing? Where did this belief come from? Is it actually helping me, or is it actually keeping me from experiencing more of what it is that I'd like to experience, or less of what I don't want to experience? Either way, to really step into, the elevated identity that ultimately most of us are seeking. And I think the starting point is that regulation. We need to feel safe in order to get curious and ask those questions. We need to feel safe before we start digging into the beliefs that we hold and where they might have come from, because that can be unsettling at times for sure, but it's also very freeing, right? When we come to that space of feeling safe. So I would love for you to share a little bit specifically, if you have any favorite tools or strategies that you'd like to share for becoming more regulated, or if you want to talk a little bit more briefly in there as well about the science behind nervous system regulation, please feel free to do that as well.
Yeah. The tools that I love using is breathwork, EFT tapping. I do love including movement in terms of some beautiful intuitive movement, and so that beautiful somatic embodiment practices. And that can vary in terms of what we do at any point in time. But the breath is so underrated. Our beautiful nervous system, our beautiful autonomic nervous system does, we breathe without having to think it. But the amazing thing is that we can actually bring in our attention and intention to our breath, and that can actually help us not only just become, in terms of this regulated nervous system, but that starts to allow us to create that bit of safety within us. And when you're feeling that little bit of safety within, even though the rest of you is still scared and nervous and in fear, once you've got that little bit in, you can continue. You're there. You're going to be all right. So the breath is just so beautiful.
Most of the time, we're not actually physically unsafe. It's just that we have had these patterns, right? And so if we can come into the present moment and really be in the now with our experience, we can eliminate replaying of past things that are continuing to play out. We can eliminate fear of what may or may not happen in the future from overriding that current experience of right now as well. So, finding that moment to be with your breath can really bring you into a grounding present moment that can help you easily sort of get to a little bit more of a non-judgmental place where you feel
Definitely.
safer.
It can just even just bring you back to your in your body right now.
Mm.
And again, yes, if you're in a trauma state, or if you have been triggered and activated where your body thinks it's back into a trauma state,
Yeah.
the breath that can allow you to bring you back to where you are right now. And just even the touch of your body, to touch, say, that the center of your chest as you're breathing, and bringing again that beautiful intention and attention to yourself, to your breath, and then even to the touch. It doesn't have to be to the heart space if that's not where it feels safe for you at that time. For something, it could be just feeling the touch of the feet onto the floor and feeling that beautiful grounding as you are breathing, and taking those intentional breaths to allow you to come back into your body.
Yeah. And so what would you recommend for, I love breath work as well, but I know I hear it somewhat regularly from people who say that their mind is too scattered or that they're too distracted. Do you have any techniques for recentering and being able to bring that scatter brain that's all over the place, checking the to-do list, checking this is exactly what's contributing to the anxiety and the overwhelm, is this overactive brain. What strategies do you like to use to bring that back into focus and actually
Yeah.
get down to that breath?
Yeah, so for me, at times I can be like everyone else when we're all really busy and stuff.
Yeah.
I can feel very, scattered and a bit everywhere. And so for me, I will actually start to do some EFT tapping, where we use our fingertips and we tap predominantly on our face, upper body, and our fingertips. And I will start to tap because my hands are doing something. And while I'm tapping, I then start to bring that intention and attention to my breath. So whilst I'm doing that, my hands are doing something.
Yeah.
I now bring in the breath, and after I do a few rounds of that tapping, I'll stop with my tapping and I'll put my hand somewhere. Usually for me, because I know for me, my sense of safety within my body is putting my hands on my heart space. So knowing that from doing the work that I've done already on myself, I know when I put my hands on my heart space that I'll feel that extra connection to my body. And that allows my body to know that it's in a safer place. So if I'm feeling all frazzled, I will do my tapping and I'll bring in the breath as I'm tapping, and then knowing when I finish the tapping and I'm just centering myself with that, and I can continue with my breath. That's for me a beautiful way to go from really, really frazzled to starting to bring myself with that breath. And for everyone, it can be so many, it can, how long you may tap to how long you then start to continue with your breath. Again, we follow on our intuition, or if you go to your breath after you've done some tapping and it still doesn't feel like you're quite there, you just go back to tapping again.
Yeah.
And you just continue with that. And that's a beautiful way to start to center back in with your breath there, and allow the brain to release taking control and allow the body to be up there.
And I think, a lot of people might think it's really, because they're coming from such a space of dysregulation and overwhelm and anxiety, they have a part of their mind. And I totally am speaking from personal experience, be like, well, that's not going to work. I can't focus enough. I can't do that. It's going to take too long. I don't have time for that. All of these thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
But I want to encourage you, if that's you, you don't have to start with an hour. Okay. You can start with 1 or 2 minutes. You can start with just focusing on the breath. You can focus on one thing that I like to do sometimes when I'm really feeling in that space, which thankfully, touch wood, is far and far less frequent for me, but counting my breaths, because that gives my mind a task to do that's actually directly involved with the regulation. And it doesn't give as much space for my mind to wander over to the to-do list. Now, if I'm fully honest, full disclosure, sometimes it still does. And I want you to know that if that is your experience as well, that is okay. That is literally what your brain is designed to do. So I don't want anyone to think that if they've tried meditation or they've tried breath work and their mind keeps wandering, yes, that is what it is meant to do. Your brain is doing its job. Okay. So your job is just to keep gently bringing it back, to the task at hand. And the more often, you are able to bring it back to your breath or to, and the breath is a really good place to focus if you are dealing with a lot of trauma, because it does give you something to focus on as opposed to just attempting to find an empty space within or something like that. That can feel extra traumatizing. But having the breath as something to really center your thoughts on, counting it to help your brain stay on task, can really be effective at bringing down the anxiety, because we can't continue to escalate when we are breathing, right? We notice that we feel really tense and really worked up because we're holding our breath a lot of the time. So the key, like the antidote to continuously feeling like our shoulders are coming up and we're all tense and tight, like the key to that is to breathe and release and let it go. And the way that we can become more of that independent observer without the judgments is actually just to start from this space. Right.
We can even, if you mentioned in terms of feeling that tightness in the shoulders, we can use that with our breath as well. And, breathe in, bring the shoulders up right to our ears, and then let out and bring the shoulders down and continue with that. And that's, bringing these beautiful somatic embodiment tools in with our breath to go, okay, I'm feeling it in my shoulders, instead of feeling like we have to avoid doing anything with our shoulders and coming like really centered and staying still. We can use that, and you can use that to bring in with your breath, and that can start to draw in again attention and intention into our breath by just breathing in, bringing those shoulders up to the knee, up to our ears, and back down. However long you need to do that for, you do it however you feel that it needs to. And that's just one of these beautiful ways that we can bring in our body to our breath again, to start creating that safety. For some other people, it could be just nearly rubbing their hands together and placing them over their eyes or over their ears, and allowing space to be behind the eyes, allowing space to be behind the ears, that you are now creating and holding space for yourself, just by doing that, and knowing that as you're like rubbing the hands together, that you can breathe while you're doing that. And then as you're placing them over your hands over your eyes, you can then breathe in to imagine breathing in that space behind the eyes. And then as you're breathing out, allowing that space to flow through around the eyes and circulate. And just that itself, that touch, again, when I mentioned the touch to the body, that's the touch to your face, that's bringing in the breath, and it's bringing in that beautiful awareness, attention and intention to your body by even creating that space behind the eyes. Because if we're all frazzled and whatever we may be in the state that we're at, sometimes the eyes are taking on a lot of stress. The jaw takes on a lot of stress. Our shoulders take on a lot of stress. Our ears, if we're very susceptible to noise, just even covering that and creating that space behind the ears, maybe what you need at that time to help bring in that attention and intention to our breath. So it's just beautiful how we can use the breath in so many different ways to help regulate our nervous system.
Yeah. And from that space of no longer judging what those things mean, right? When we are just experiencing, my shoulders are tight today. My neck is tight today. I'm feeling pressure in my eyes, without the stories, without the elaboration, just as an observation, purely as information, then we can process and move through it. We can take what is there as perhaps something to release, something to learn, something to accept, something to just be more aware of, and have that experience in whatever way, we desire to have that experience, and then move along to new and different experiences, continuing to grow and expand and lean more into the intuition, what feels right and good for us, leaning into the intuition that we know within our heart, our soul, our entire energetic being, what is correct for us. So with that, I would love for you to share a little bit about what you're working on, anything that you'd like to share with the listeners as far as offerings or exciting projects that you're currently jazzed about.
Yes. So with my work, I do one-on-one and group work. So I do monthly connection sessions for our nervous system healing. So where we come together on Zoom for 1 hour and we do different nervous system regulation tools, and they're intuitively led. Every session is different. And you can do one-on-ones, but I have also released a book called The Intuitive Detective, which is available at all major online bookstores, and your local bookstores can order it in. And it is a memoir of my life until now.
Yeah.
On how listening to my intuition, and at times not listening to my intuition, has shaped my life, on being aware of my nervous system and at recognizing at times when I was dysregulated, and how I wasn't really then attuned or listening to my intuition when that happened. And so that has only just been released. So I'm sure when this airs, it's all readily available, and you can get it from there as well.
Wonderful. Yeah. And where can listeners get a hold of you online? What's the best space for them to find you?
Yeah, so I'm predominantly on Instagram, so you can find me on there. My profile handle is _Stacey Webb. I am also on Facebook, and I do have a website which is www.staceywebb.com.au, the AU for the Australian. Awesome. So you can find me there. And my book you can get on Amazon. In America, you can go on Barnes & Noble, Walmart, and if any other people from other countries are listening in, you can get it from Book Depository and Dymix Online, and pretty much anywhere else, but they're the major holders there.
Awesome. Well, we'll make sure to put all those links in the show notes so that people can track you down if they are wanting to learn a little bit more. I'd like to finish off with a little choose your own adventure. What is something you would wish I had asked you about? And then how would you have responded to whatever question you wish I had asked, to just leave the listeners with a little something?
Yeah. I guess how we could strengthen our intuition and how that fits in with our nervous system. So we're more able, or we're more willing to listen to our intuition when we're in a regulated nervous system state. And so to strengthen that is merely to listen and follow the guidance. And once we continuously do that, intuition is like a muscle. We strengthen it. It starts to become more clearer on translating what it's telling us. And it's beautiful to follow it. You just don't always know where it's going to lead you. And the ego is what wants us to know where it's going. So, yeah.
Yeah. And that's all part of the life's adventure that we have here, of exploring where we are going to go next. And that is literally part of the fun of life, of exploring and creating for ourselves, whatever it is that we want to experience. So leaning into our intuition will help us to really identify what it is, what those adventures look like for us, what those experiences look like for us on an individual basis, and how we can make them happen, make those experiences become our reality. So that's pretty magical.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for being here today. This has been a fantastic conversation. I hope it has been really helpful and maybe enlightening for some people who are maybe still kind of, dealing with those patterns, and they'd like to break away from them and start to lean into intuition, start to be more regulated, to ultimately become the creator of their own experience in the powerful as fuck way that you can. So thank you so much for sharing. It has been an absolute blast.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for listening to today's show. I trust you were inspired to take back your power and create your happy. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, leave a review, and share the show with women in your life who could use a little extra inspiration today. If you'd like to connect with myself and or today's guest, you can find those details in the show notes. We would love to hear from you. If you've got an inspiring story to share, you can also apply to be a guest on the show at createyourhappy.ca. As always, get out there, have fun, be you, and create your happy.